Hi there and welcome to Digital Tutorials. In this video I'm going to give you a quick overview of all the different layer styles in Photoshop. So let's begin. Open up your Photoshop, and for this tutorial we're just going to open the default Photoshop size. It's quite small, it's about 504 pixels by 360 pixels. And what we're going to do is we're just going to create a simple box. So to get to the box, to the rectangular tool, go to your tools over here, or click you can press U to get a shortcut. You can check out my video on keyboard shortcuts if you'd like to learn more. It's definitely informative and saves a lot of time. And we're just going to create a square. Now if you want it to be square and not rectangular, you just hit shift and it'll keep it a square. Alright, now we're going to go over here and we are going to double click on the layer rectangle, and this brings up your layer styles. Now here you have all the different layer styles which can spice up and funk up your layer. These work with text. It really doesn't matter what the layer is. So I'm just gonna run through the list. This is CS6. In CS5 it might be a little different, the positioning, but it's still the same layout. It's still the same idea and the same controls. So I'm gonna start from bottom up. The first one here that you'll see is a drop shadow. By clicking the drop shadow, by checking the drop shadow, I should say, it'll bring up the default drop shadow. Now if you hover above the drop shadow word, as opposed to just clicking on it, check marking it, it'll bring up this window. And this is the drop shadow control box. Here you have all your blending options. I'm gonna choose normal. You have the opacity of your blend of your drop shadow, so you can bring it down to kind of give it a lighter touch. The distance from your subject and object, as you can see, the amount it spreads, and the size. So if I wanted to create something of this nature, it would be like this, with a large size and a zero distance. And then also you have the angle at which the shadow is facing. So this would be a 90-degree, which would mean the light would be coming from a 90-degree angle, creating the shadow pointing downwards. And then here you have your different qualities of a drop shadow. Next we have the outer glow. Outer glow adds a glow around the box. Now the blending mode is on the screen. I'm going to put it on normal so you can see it a little better. Now here you have all the different spreads, size. Depends. If you bring up the size, it'll make it a large, nice glow. If you just spread it with a smaller size, it'll be more of kind of like a stroke around it. So I wouldn't really do that, especially when it comes to glow. And here you can choose the color. We're gonna go, let's say, with like a nice neon blue, very 90s. Oh yeah, super 90s, maybe even 80s. There we go. We got a nice glow going, and I would bring the opacity down a little bit to kind of give it a smaller touch. You can add noise, as you can see, this kind of effect. Also to make it more precise or softer, to give it a nice fade or a blend. And the same goes over here, different qualities depending on what you're looking for. Jitter, which is also, I'm not sure if you can see, I'm going to zoom in. Jitter is also kind of like, it adds a little noise, it adds like a jittery feel to it, as you can see. And range, the range of this quality. Okay, done with that. Next we'll go on to pattern overlay. This will add a pattern on top of your layer. Now if there's like information that you want here, this is gonna cover it unless you bring the opacity down. As you can see, I can still see the color of the gray box underneath because the opacity is at 7, but if it's at 100, you have your different patterns here. Now you can download different patterns from the internet, so you can actually go pretty wild with this. And also the scale, depending on how zoomed in on the pattern you actually are. So I can create a well, tic-tac-toe. Anyone? All right. Next, and also you have your blending modes. The next is gradient overlay. Now this will add a gradient to the layer, and over here again you have the gradient editor, and you can select the many presets that are available that come automatically by default with Photoshop, rainbow color and all these different ones. If you'd like to create your own, you can go ahead over here, and by double clicking on any of these gradient on any of these palettes, you can, or these swatches I should say, you can select the color. And so I'm going, let's say, from red to light red. It'll create that gradient, and you can always add more by just clicking anywhere over here and changing what you'd like the color to be, and it'll add that gradient into it. Now I'm going to create a pretty detailed one because I just want to show you something. Now you can always save this by putting in the name, by putting in the name and then saving it. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'll show you. So once I have the gradient, I can choose the different styles of linear, radial, where it's pretty self-explanatory, on an angle, and obviously changing the angle by degrees will affect that. The same thing goes for linear. If I'm doing a 90-degree angle, it'll do it straight down. If I'm doing it sideways, it'll do like a linear one sideways. And reflected, where it just reflects and so it repeats itself. It's like a mirrored version. And diamond. Now here also you have scale, which if I was to go here to linear, so scale will create either a very sharp contrasted gradient like this, and the larger the scale, the more of a blend it becomes. That's pretty much for this. Now for color overlay is very simple. It just adds a color on top of whatever your layer is. So if you have an image and you add color overlay, just know the image will disappear. You're gonna have a color unless you bring the opacity down, like I said before. So here you have gray at 0 capacity, and the more I go up, the more of a red it is, because that's the color overlay that's selected. And over here you have all your different blends. I will have a different video on blending modes, but for the moment we'll just leave that at normal. Next we have satin. Satin will add a satin effect. I'll go to normal blend. Over here it's the same, opacity as self-explanatory. The angle, as you can see, the angle at which it will pop out, bubble out. Here you can also create like the distance of and the size. So if I wanted to create a button like effect, I would create something a little small, not too big, and blend it a little bit inwards, like so. This is satin. Next you have inner glow. It's pretty much like outer glow. It's mostly the same ideas, except it's inside of the box. So again, size, you have your choke here. Pretty much all are the same controls as outer glow. The only difference is you can create the glow from the center or from the edges, and that's important to keep in mind. Next we have the inner shadow. This adds a shadow inside. Same thing as outer shadow, drop shadow, except it's inside. It's pretty much the same idea here. The distance, the size, blending modes, opacity, very standard. Stroke adds a line around, within, or a mix of both of your layer. So what I mean by that is by selecting position, you can add a line to the outside, you can add a line to the inside, or you can add a line by the center. As you can see, and this is very important, especially if you are a graphic designer, when you hit it on the outside, it's more curved, the line, the border, and when you hit it on the inside, it's very rectangular and sharp. And that's very important to keep in mind. Obviously, a curved border and image is a lot different of a feel than a squared one or rectangular sharp one. And here you can change the different colors and so on and so forth. The opacity, the size, obviously is how large you want it. This is going inside, outside it would be like so. Alright, next we have bevel and emboss. This is pretty much like satin, except this will create a raised feel to your effect. And here you have your depth, how deep, the size of how inwardly it'll go. So this is definitely your this is your preferred tool if you're creating buttons and things like that. And this is pretty much, you got your direction going up, down. This is where you want your shadow to be up or on the top or the bottom. Smooth, you can create a chisel, hard, or chisel soft. The same goes, you can have an outer bevel. You can emboss it. Pillow emboss, a little more delicate. And stroke emboss. This will emboss your stroke if it's on. Within bevel emboss, you have texture. So I'm just gonna go ahead and inner bevel it. You have your texture, which adds a texture onto the beveled area. Now this will, same goes here for the scale of pretty much of how zoomed in it will be, and the depth. Now, and you have contour. Contour is this. Alright, that's my knowledge of bevel and emboss. Not so great. Anyways, when you go to blending option, this is at the top, and this is the most important. This will control the basics and the standard layer as is. So you have your blend mode, you have the opacity of the entire layer, which is important, and this you can also control from over here. From right here, you can control the opacity of the layer. Let me just get rid of that glow. But also, if you would like the fill opacity, which is the opacity of the inside of the layer, the fill. So right now it's filled with gray. So if I was to create a stroke, and I like inside stroke because I like precision as opposed to curves. That wasn't a reference of men and women. I'm just okay, good. Glad we got that out of the way. Fill opacity, when you bring that down, it'll take the fill out, so you won't be able, the fill will be taken out, like I said before, and the stroke will still be there. However, if I brought the opacity down from the entire thing, nothing will be there. The entire layer will be, well, depending on the opacity percentage that you select. Okay, that's in a nutshell the layer styles. You can have a lot of fun with this. You can create pretty much limitless ideas if you're creative enough, but I highly recommend just fooling around with that and creating some great work, and yeah, enjoy.